In the heart of New York City, a single playground became the epicenter of an impossible crime. Not once, but twice. This is a story of how, in the same spot, under the watchful eyes of their guardians, two toddlers vanished without a trace. Just months apart, they were stolen in broad daylight from a crowded park, sparking a mystery that has endured for over 3 decades. The impossible disappearances of Christopher Dansby and Shane Walker. May 18th of 1989 was a warm Thursday evening in Harlem. The Martin Luther King Jr. Towers playground, located at Lenox Avenue and 114th Street, was buzzing with the sounds of children playing. A typical urban scene. Among them was 2-year-old Christopher Dansby, a cheerful little boy his family called Choo Choo. His mother, Allison Dansby, was there with him and other family members, including Christopher's grandmother. Needing to grab a few things from a nearby grocery store, Allison made a decision that would haunt her forever. She left Christopher with his grandmother, a choice any parent might make on any given day. When Allison returned from her brief errand, the familiar sounds of the playground turned into a deafening silence. Her son was gone. Panic set in immediately. A frantic search began, with Allison and her mother calling out his name, their voices swallowed by the city. Christopher, who was last seen wearing a blue jacket, floral shirt, and blue jeans, had simply vanished. The only potential lead came from a 7-year-old witness who the next day claimed to have seen a child matching Christopher's description walking nearby with an unidentified man. Some reports described the man as being in his mid to late 20s, with dreadlocks, but this sighting was never confirmed. The man was never identified. The New York City Police Department launched a massive search. More than 200 officers canvassed a 24-block area, using police dogs and going door to door in the towering apartment complex. Divers searched the Harlem Mere in nearby Central Park, but it was as if the little boy had just ceased to exist. There were no signs of a struggle, no ransom notes, and no credible witnesses to an abduction. Despite the park being crowded, Christopher Dansby was gone without a trace. For 3 months, the neighborhood lived with the quiet fear and the unanswered questions left by Christopher's disappearance. Allison Dansby's posters, bearing her son's face, were a constant tragic reminder. Then, the nightmare started all over again. On August 10th of 1989, another warm Thursday evening, Rosa Glover brought her 19-month-old son, Shane Walker, to the very same playground. Rosa and Shane also lived in the MLK Towers, in the same building as the Dansby family. Though the mothers didn't know each other at the time, Rosa had just returned from a trip to Disneyland with Shane and wasn't aware that a child had been stolen from that very park just months before. As Rosa sat on a bench watching her son, 2 children, a 10-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy, approached and asked if Shane could play with them, in what would become the most chilling detail of the entire mystery. It was reported that these were the same 2 children who were last seen playing with Christopher Dansby. Rosa agreed, keeping a close eye on them. A few moments later, a man sat down on the bench next to her and began a strange, unsettling conversation. He talked about how things happen to children and pointed out his own scars from fights. An ominous distraction that pulled Rosa's attention away from her son for just a minute or two. When she turned back, the spot where the kids were playing was empty. Shane was gone. The 2 children he had been with reappeared moments later, claiming they had left Shane in the park and had no idea where he went. Again, the park had been crowded. Again, no one saw a thing. The man on the bench and the 2 children were questioned extensively by police, but they offered no useful information and were cleared of any involvement. Just like Christopher Dansby, Shane Walker had been stolen in broad daylight. from the exact same spot under nearly identical circumstances. The disappearance of a second toddler from the same playground sent a shockwave of terror through Harlem. The similarities between the two cases were too stark to ignore. Both were black toddlers, living in the same building. Both vanished on a Thursday evening from the same crowded playground. And most disturbingly, they both were reported last seen in the company of the same brother and sister duo. Just 4 days after Shane went missing, NYPD Acting Deputy Chief Ronald Finrich publicly acknowledged the eerie parallels, stating that investigators believed the cases were likely linked. The police response was enormous, mirroring the search for Christopher. Once again, hundreds of officers scoured the area, but just as before, they found nothing. Investigators were baffled. Stranger abductions are already rare, but for two to happen in the same location with such a specific, repeated pattern was unprecedented. The lack of physical evidence or ransom demands left police chasing phantoms. An unconfirmed sighting of a man, an unsettling man on a bench, and two children who were either the world's unluckiest witnesses or pawns in a sinister plot. While investigators suspected the cases were connected, no suspects were ever publicly named or charged, and the cases grew cold, leaving two families and an entire city to grapple with an impossible mystery. With no solid evidence, investigators and the public were left with only theories. One of the most prominent and enduring is that both Christopher and Shane were victims of a sophisticated black market adoption ring. This theory suggests the boys were specifically targeted and stolen to be sold to desperate couples who couldn't adopt legally. Retired NYPD Inspector Ken Lindell, who worked the case, has speculated that this is the best case scenario, that the boys survived and were sold to people who wanted a child. The idea gained traction partly because of a chilling precedent set just 2 years earlier in Harlem. In 1987, an infant named Carlina White was abducted from Harlem Hospital by a woman posing as a nurse. She was raised by her kidnapper under a fake name and in a truly remarkable turn of events, solved her own kidnapping 23 years later, after finding her baby photo on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children website. The Carlina White case proved that such abductions weren't just fiction. They were a terrifying reality in New York City. It offered a silver of hope that Christopher and Shane might also be alive somewhere, raised by another family, completely unaware of their true identities. A related theory suggests the abductions weren't the work of a large ring, but were orchestrated by a single person or family desperate for a child. The apparent use of the two older children as decoys and the man on the bench as a distraction points to a planned, coordinated effort, not a random act of violence. Other theories have been considered and mostly dismissed. The idea that the boys were murdered seems less likely, given that no bodies were ever found despite exhaustive searches. Some have tried to link the cases to the March 1989 abduction of 1-month-old Andre Bryant in Brooklyn, but the circumstances of that case, which involved the murder of the baby's mother, were starkly different. After more than 30 years, the black market adoption theory remains a leading explanation for how two children could vanish so completely. For the mothers, Allison Dansby and Rosa Glover, the decades since 1989 have been a long, hard process with no closure. Allison described the sheer panic of returning to the park to find her son just gone. Rosa has spoken of her heartbreak and her plan to leave New York with Shane if he is ever found, to go somewhere, just the two of us. Both mothers have fought relentlessly to keep their son's stories alive, participating in countless media interviews of the years and returning to the playground that holds their darkest memories. The hope sparked by Carlina White's reunion with her family has fueled their own belief that their sons could still be out there. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has released age progress images showing what Christopher and Shane might look like today. as men approaching their late 30s. These images are a haunting reminder of the lives that were stolen and the families that were shattered. The mystery of the Harlem Playground continues to generate tips, especially after being featured on Netflix Unsolved Mysteries. So far, none have led to a breakthrough. The disappearance of Christopher Dansby and Shane Walker are more than just cold cases. They're a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we can be. What do you think happened at that playground in 1989? Share your theories in the comments below. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Christopher Dansby or Shane Walker, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. And if you want to explore more cases that defy explanation, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. 2 toddlers stolen from the same spot, months apart, in a crime that seems impossible. Despite massive police searches, media attention, and the tireless efforts of their families, there have been no arrests and no answers. Christopher Dansby and Shane Walker, if they are alive, are now grown men who likely have no idea who they really are. Their mothers have waited a lifetime for a phone call, a knock on the door, for any news at all. The Harlem Playground mystery endures, a silent monument to 2 stolen boys and the haunting, unanswered questions. Where did they go?